And to breaking news now, a major police incident in East Vancouver.
Norma Reed following this in our breaking news center.
Well, roughly a dozen VPD officers and detectives are at an East Vancouver address right now. This is the latest from Commercial and Kitchener in Vancouver. We can roll that footage right about here. There you go. So right now there is a forensic identification unit on scene, as well as an ambulance and officers, like I said, some of them not in uniform. Sources telling us that this incident involves a young child, but the exact details and the severity of this incident are still unknown at this point. Now, we do know that this has been unfolding just within the last hour. Again, police investigating something that happened in a three-story house on Kitchener Street.
Investigators looking into yesterday's death of a toddler at an East Vancouver home say the child did not live there. CTV's David Molko is looking into this. David, what else do we know about what happened?
Hey, Colleen, the point you just mentioned, quite important. The child not living in this home, according to the coroner's service here. So that raises the question of what the child was doing in this duplex. We know that it is owned by a couple, but there was a tenant renting out the left side of the house. The lights off behind me here, the rain coming down. And that raises the question of whether this may have been a home daycare. It wasn't registered. It wasn't licensed. We looked into that. Potentially could have been a relative looking after the child as well. Let's give you a look at some tape from earlier today. What's interesting, though, is that police continue to remain at the scene here, in and out of the front yard, not into the house. They said they were keeping the peace, but in a statement, the police saying little, except they still consider the death not suspicious.
The family of a toddler who died in an East Vancouver home earlier this week says the child was at daycare when the accident happened, but there is no licensed daycare at that location. CTV's David Molko reports on a tragedy that's left a family in mourning and looking for answers.
Hey, Mac, what you doing?
These home videos of little Mac
I bite you first.
show a toddler and his uncle in happier times. This family now facing the devastating loss of their son, Father Chris, Mother Shelley, and young Mac, a day shy of 16 months. It's quiet here along Kitchener Street, though the police are still outside, and in the front fence of the house, some flowers left behind in memory of baby Mac. On Wednesday, the road outside the duplex was filled with flashing lights. Mac's death, police say, not suspicious. In a Facebook posting, Mac's uncle calling the tragedy an unfortunate accident while at daycare.
Any program that's registered with us will show up on this map.
At West Coast Child Care Resource Center, we checked to see if the address was licensed or registered. And it's clearly not there.
Yeah.
Which doesn't necessarily make it illegal, says Director of Programs Crystal Janes, but does mean that whoever was running it didn't go through the safety checks that come with registration and can give parents extra peace of mind.
Ensuring things like there's safety gates at stairs, that the kitchen is inaccessible to the children, that there's supervision in the bathroom.
It's unclear who ran that daycare in a unit inside this home. When CTV reached the registered owners of both units on the phone, Peter Scott and Karen Cruz, they hung up. Mac's family revealing little more about their loss, though a GoFundMe page set up on their behalf tallied more than $50,000 in less than 24 hours, along with heartfelt messages and prayers, but no clues as to whether baby Mac's death could have been prevented. David Molko, CTV News, Vancouver.
This is CTV News with Mike Killeen and Tamara Taggart.
Good evening. We begin with breaking news. A major development in the case of a little boy who was killed at an unlicensed daycare in Vancouver earlier this month.
Norma Reed is following this in our breaking news center tonight. And Norma, the toddler's parents are speaking out for the first time?
Yeah, they are. They issued a statement late today. As you can imagine, it is very emotional, but it's also very powerful. They are pushing for massive reform to this province's daycare system, something so many people have been asking for a long time. Parents Shelley Shepard and Chris Saney talk about the memories they have of their son, baby Mac. He died January 18th, one day before he would have turned 16 months old. They say they did all the checks diligent parents should do. They were given assurances, but it was meaningless. Baby Mac's death was preventable, they say. I've pulled a quote. Like most parents in BC, we found the choices impossibly limited when it came to daycare spaces. Parents are rushed to take the one spot available and pressured into making decisions that may not work for their family.
Also tonight, a plea from grieving parents reignites the daycare debate.
There's no way of knowing. It's just left to chance.
The tragic death of their little boy exposes a system in crisis. CTV has uncovered new developments in the case of baby Mac. He's the toddler who died at an unlicensed East Vancouver daycare.
Just yesterday, Mac's parents said his death was entirely preventable. Our David Mulco went looking for the daycare operator and brings us the latest.
When did they leave?
We don't know. We were literally not in Vancouver.
Just behind this door, landlords Karen Cruz and Peter Scott are cleaning up and saying little.
We really, truly don't have anything we can say.
A week ago Wednesday, the street outside their duplex was filled with flashing lights. Today, memorial flowers wilt in the fence. The tenants who rented out the left side units since October, gone.
Did you know she was running a daycare?
No.
Little Mac died a day shy of 16 months. His father Chris and mother Shelley now promising to fight for daycare reform in his memory. The most precious and vulnerable members of our population aren't able to tell us what is happening behind closed doors. Part of their letter reads, "We in BC need to know that when our children are away from us, that they will not be harmed." So we went to see the Minister of Children and Family Development.
She is here in the office.
She is.
So it's pretty clear the minister doesn't want to talk about this, though she did come out with this statement here saying parents have the right to choose the option that works best for their families. Mac's family, though, saying the choices were impossibly limited. There were no good options.
It's just chaos.
Early education advocate Emily Mliechko says solutions like the $10 a day plan are out there. What's missing is commitment.
When people say we can't afford it, it's going to cost us too much money, in reality, once it's implemented, the system actually makes money for itself.
A system that let these parents down. All that's left now, they say, memories. David Mulco, CTV News, Vancouver.
Hey, Mac, what you doing?
Daycare tragedy in East Vancouver.
It's impossible for families to know where to go to get all the information.
A CTV News investigation into the death of baby Mac. Now to a CTV News investigation into the death of a toddler at an unlicensed East Vancouver daycare.
The death of the 16-month-old little boy happened 2 weeks ago, and we've learned this isn't the first time the woman who ran it was in the daycare business.
CTV's David Mulco has a story that's raising questions about why BC parents don't have better access to information on the people they hire to care for their children.
Did you know she was running a daycare?
No.
But since we first asked her landlords that question, we've now learned the truth. A couple whose child was previously in her care confirming to CTV News that Yasmin Saad, seen here in this blog post, operated an unlicensed daycare at the Kitchener Street duplex, the place where 16-month-old baby Mac died.
And you have no idea where she's gone?
I'd like to know that myself.
The landlords say she's moved out, so we went looking. A search of court records turning up a woman with the same name, phone number, and email address who operated a daycare back in 2010. This small claims lawsuit filed in October 2010 by parents who wanted their money back, alleging she had represented herself as a licensed child care facility, but was not. Court records show Saad, using the first name Susie, paid the $580. The paper trail leads here to West 16th. There's a new tenant now, and the landlord says there's no record of any daycare at this address. But Vancouver Coastal Health said they had a complaint about an unlicensed daycare at that home in 2010. And when they sent someone to investigate, a licensing officer found the operator was not in compliance with the number of children permitted as an unlicensed daycare, and directed them to reduce the number of children in care. For advocates like Sharon Gregson, it raises another troubling question in the already murky world of unlicensed daycare.
It's impossible for families to know where to go to get all the information that they need that might dig up those past claims.
CTV found Vancouver Coastal Health has a searchable database for licensed child care inspections, but when it comes to the rest?
I'm not sure parents would even know about past history and those red flags.
Police are calling Mac's death not suspicious, but are still investigating, while our calls and emails to Yasmin Saad were not returned.
Hey, Mac, what you doing?
Baby Mac's parents calling for massive reform of BC's childcare system, saying the checks they did and the questions they asked ultimately were meaningless.
All right, David joins us live now. This story is obviously extremely upsetting, and it's really stressful for parents to find daycare. Why can't they go somewhere, a website or something, and get a list of unlicensed daycares?
Yeah, it's a really tough question. And here's the problem, though. Because they're unlicensed, they aren't inspected unless there's some sort of complaint. So also keep in mind, just because they're unlicensed doesn't mean they're doing anything illegal. What's interesting, though, is Ontario has launched a daycare database. You can see it here. Parents can search it. It includes violations of both licensed and unlicensed daycares. We asked BC's Health Ministry why we don't have one here. They said it was an interesting question, and they might get in touch with the folks in Toronto to find out more.
A concerned mother is speaking out tonight in a CTV News exclusive. She reached out to us after learning about the death of a toddler last month in East Vancouver at an unlicensed daycare. David Mulco reports on the concern she had years ago about the daycare operator.
Hey, Mac, what you doing?
An uncle and his nephew.
I bite you first.
Their smiles and laughter now just memories. For parents who will never see their son again after Baby Mac's sudden death in January at an unlicensed daycare. CTV News confirmed the woman who ran it was Yasmin Saad. She's moved out, but when we followed the paper trail, it led us to a house on West 16th, one health authorities confirmed they had inspected in 2010.
And I heard this name.
Our story jogging another mother's memory.
Yasmin Saad. It was the Olive Branch Family Daycare.
The place Tara King and her husband visited 7 years ago in their search for a daycare for their 9-month-old son. The place where they first met Yasmin Saad.
I walked in and it appeared chaotic. I remember a staircase. I remember there not being a safety gate.
But the biggest red flag.
She told me it was a fully licensed daycare. I asked to see verification of that. She didn't have it.
So Tara King says she walked out the door and crossed the Olive Branch off her list. And then she took it one step further, sending this inquiry to Vancouver Coastal Health to see if the daycare was licensed. CTV has learned that a licensing officer did find that the daycare had too many children. And when we asked if the inspector had followed up, they wrote, "We can't speak to anything that might be related to an ongoing investigation."
I'm a parent. I think all parents worry.
But when King heard about Baby Mac's death, her concern turned to guilt.
I raised those red flags. So how is it that someone is able to continue providing for children who are at the most innocent and vulnerable stage in their life?
Police say they're still investigating Mac's death, but there's no indication Yasmin Saad is responsible. Our calls and emails to Saad were not returned.
Up the hill.
Tara King's first son is now 7.
Here we go.
And with her youngest the same age as Baby Mac, she wants his grieving parents to know this.
That I'm sorry. That they're brave. And we need to stick together as parents to fight for this. Every parent, every child deserves the right to quality, safe daycare.
The parents of a 16-month-old boy who died in January are calling for a subsidized daycare system to prevent another tragedy. Baby Mac died near Commercial Drive last January at an unlicensed daycare. And as David Mulco reports tonight, the parents are reaching out to CTV News to tell their story.
I really want Mac's death to not be in vain. I really want to see change.
For the first time since their son's death, we're hearing from the parents of 16-month-old Baby Mac, his father Chris, and his mother Shelley.
You don't think this could happen to you until it does.
Baby Mac's death at an unlicensed East Van daycare in January remains under investigation. His parents posting this open letter on Facebook, referring to the deplorable state of daycare across BC and calling for change.
It needs massive reform, and so I wrote this letter so more people would know about it.
And so more people would take action. Because when it comes to finding safe, affordable daycare, Mac's father says, a few more spaces, what he calls a Band-Aid in a broken system, just isn't enough.
You asked us before whether the system failed us, and to be honest, I don't even know what system there is.
I think they're an incredibly courageous couple.
Sharon Gregson with the Coalition of Child Care Advocates champions the $10 a day plan, a plan BABYMAC's parents now publicly support.
It deals with the affordability crisis, it deals with the need to expand spaces, and it deals with the training and wages of early childhood educators.
And Mac's parents say most of all, it would provide all parents extra peace of mind.
I don't think what we're doing is brave or courageous. We just want to make a difference. We're just trying to get through day by day, but we also realize that what happened to Matt can happen again, and we want to work to prevent it because we don't want any other parent to have to go through something like this.
The parents of a 16-month-old boy who died in January at an unlicensed East Van daycare say what happened to their son could happen again to any family.
Last night, in their first interview since BABYMAC's death, we heard about their push for reform of what they call BC's broken childcare system.
Tonight, as CTV's David Molko reports, we're learning more about what led to the tragedy.
I might do first.
For the first time, BABYMAC's parents are sharing their story.
I knew it was going to be hard to find a space. I just didn't realize it was going to be as hard as it was.
About a struggle familiar to many parents to find safe, affordable childcare for their son.
When we found his first space in the licensed daycare, it was our only option.
His father, Chris, and mother, Shelley, call their first daycare experience an absolute nightmare.
He had a big scab on his nose twice. Came home with a massive diaper rash.
So they started their search from scratch.
I bet you we're 50 to 60 phone calls deep, and we got 1 or 2 phone calls back.
That search led here to a home in East Van, an unlicensed daycare run by a woman named Yasmin Saad. Mac's parents asked questions, and her answers, Chris and Shelley say, ticked all the right boxes.
There were a lot of positives with this daycare.
However,
The second day there, he died.
I think about those last moments, how scared my son must have been. How scared he must have been. And I just hate it. It's the worst thing I can feel. And we weren't there to protect him.
The woman who made that promise, Yasmin Saad, has not returned our calls. And while police investigate BABYMAC's death, his parents are reluctant to say more.
Let me say this, David. When it does come out, what was happening there, people will be aghast. People will be horrified.
Under the crushing weight of their loss, their mission now a call for change to make sure Mac's death wasn't in vain.
I don't want to think of a world or province or system where another kid could lose their life like that.
Hey, Mac, what you doing?
He was a real special boy and the light of our lives. We were just so looking forward to watching him grow up.
All right, and David joins us now. It's really difficult to listen to them. You can just hear their pain, so it's understandable that they aren't ready to share the details of how their son died. But what do we know about what happened inside that daycare?
You're right, it was an incredibly moving conversation. Remember, too, this is a family that is in mourning every hour of every day. Chris and Shelley say they want justice for their son, and they don't want to do or say anything that might jeopardize that justice.
An emotional plea for child care reform.
It's my love for him that is my motivation to create change.
The parents of BABYMAC take aim at Christy Clark.
I would like to ask her to do more.
Just days before the election.
The parents of a little boy who died at a Vancouver daycare are sending shockwaves across the BC election campaign tonight. BABYMAC died under mysterious circumstances back in January. Now, in their first television interview, his parents are coming forward to take aim at Christy Clark and the BC Liberals on what they call the failure to help BC families find childcare. Here's David Molko with the CTV News exclusive.
We still don't get out of bed in the morning. We still, struggle every day.
Chris Sanny and Shelley Shepard lost their son nearly 4 months ago. But with the election just 4 days away, the stakes, they say, are too high to keep quiet.
Our children deserve that. Our babies deserve to be in a place that's safe.
Hey, Mac, what you doing?
The death of 16-month-old baby Mac at an unlicensed East Van daycare turning these parents into advocates for political change. Shelley penning this letter to Christy Clark, writing, "The child care system is failing and my son has paid the ultimate price." The Premier's response last month.
It's just the worst possible thing that can happen to anybody. The focus for us is to, make sure that we get those 8,000 spaces up and running.
To be honest, I cried when I saw her response on TV. I felt kind of dismissed in a way. I don't think the spaces that she's promised are enough. I think it's just a drop in the bucket for what we need.
Our own premier, as we pleaded with her publicly, didn't write us back, not even her office. And we thought that was in very poor taste.
What happened to Mac, they say, could happen again. So they're throwing their energy and their emotion behind the $10 a day daycare plan backed by the NDP.
There are no options out there for families. We were rushed into this decision.
There's not a real system out there put together with duct tape and bubble gum.
The terrible memories of January 18th still fresh. The cause of Mac's death and the woman who ran the home daycare, police say, still under investigation.
We don't even know what happened.
What do you mean?
We don't even know how he died.
No matter who wins the vote and what comes next, Chris and Shelley say they want their son remembered for his life. They've asked the city to rename this playground in his memory. Happy time spent here, a fitting tribute to their son.
If they win, we're not going to go away. We're going to continue to advocate for change.
Although my son died, my love for him never will. And it's my love for him that is my motivation to create change.
Okay, David joins us now. It's really hard to watch. It's hard to not be emotional watching his parents. I can't even believe they don't know how their son died. But what happens next for them?
Yeah, they wish the election were actually a year later, they say, so they had more time to prepare and more time to grieve. But Chris and Shelley will be out Saturday in Yaletown with other moms, dads, part of a stroller brigade. They're going to push for daycare reform. Their bottom line, they say, they want everyone to read up, to understand the plans being put forward, and most importantly, they want everyone to go vote on Tuesday.